What's going on, YouTube? Culturedog Sam Hatch back here with the conclusion to my Halloween movie challenge in the month of October, at least the past, 5 years or so, and maybe that's about when I started. I decided to do the thing where you try and watch one movie for every night in the month of October and watch all horror movies, or at least something scary or psychologically twisted. And we went through 1 through 15 in the last video, so we're going to go and get through the rest, and you'll find out if I actually made it through all 31 films this year. And so number 16 is Slugs. Yes, a film from J.P. Simon, also known as Vamp Simon. And it is the tale of a small town in upstate New York that is attacked by slugs that are now devouring humans. And what could go wrong? Everything. Everyone's dying, and nobody cares except for a couple dudes and one of their wives. So you can check out my full review on my review of the Arrow Blu-ray that just recently came out. But funny flick, and it does have its moments, and it's got some good gore. And then, man, flashback to Neil Marshall's classic Dog Soldiers. I remember this being a big deal when my local art house cinema actually got this when it first came out. I guess the proprietor had run across it at a film festival and was really enthused about it. So I thought, wow, if that place is showing this werewolf movie, I gotta check it out. But yeah, really cool flick with Sean Pertwee and Kevin McKidd from Trainspotting as a bunch of weekend warriors who end up on a little bit bigger excursion than they anticipated when they're trapped in the woods, and these special ops guys are eviscerated by something. And then you realize, ooh, there may be some lycanthropes involved. And they eventually hole up for a night, and all sorts of nastiness goes down. Yeah, a throwback to all sorts of classic flicks, and even things like Aliens, etc. So, yeah, Neil Marshall was wearing a lot of his influences on his sleeves in this thing. But, yeah, really cool flick. And I did hear the newer Blu-ray was botched in terms of, like, day for night shots weren't properly processed, etc. And it's a really, really dark, dim flick. But, yeah, this old one in the Steelbook isn't too bad. So it was cool firing that up. Then I decided to get heretical and fire up Rob Zombie's Halloween. And, yeah, I am a bit of an apologist for this film. Saw it a few times in the theater, and there's something to this flick. And I'm a huge fan of, John Carpenter's original Halloween. So the fact that I do enjoy this says something. Rob Zombie's like redneck extremism, like he's like redneck Tarantino times 20. That does wear a little thin, especially in the terms of William Forsythe's character, who's an abusive stepfather in Michael Myers' household as a child. But that stuff isn't overwhelming in the face of all the other things that get brought to the table. And yeah, Rob Zombie latches onto a lot of things that Carpenter sprinkled, especially in the TV cut, which showed more with Michael Myers as a young child. And obviously it goes for a different tactic. John Carpenter's film eventually becomes more of like a supernatural entity, boogeyman type feature. And this one is more about what happens if a young, psychopath grows up to be an old psychopath and takes everybody out. Really good cast and some really harrowing scenes. I do really enjoy the first part of the film, which is almost as much a throwback to Bad Ronald as it is to Halloween. But yeah, some good 70s visuals to it, and when he does retell the tale of the original Halloween, he does bring a couple things to the table. I wonder if they have to do a proper full review of this sucker, but especially like Dee Wallace's character, the Strode family, and what he does to them. It's really harrowing stuff, and it kind of brings a humanism, strangely, a Rob Zombie of all people, to the murders, and really makes you feel for them. I was really surprised about that aspect of it. There's kind of like a haunted house finale that gets tired out. The first film was definitely, or original film was definitely stronger in that it staged it in a suburban landscape to the bitter end, and that was kind of what was terrifying about it. So it loses some of its impact when he changes it up at the end here. But I don't know, man. Tyler Bates' music is really, really good. I love all the cameos. Ken Foree is classic. I quote that line about "Let me pass this beast in peace" all the time. I mean, not to strangers in the bathroom, but yeah, it's just yeah. This film is supposed to be a piece of crap, but it isn't. So there's that. Then I fired up another video Arrow sent me, which you can check out my Blu-ray review of Vamp with Chris Makepeace and Getty Watanabe and many more. Grace Jones in there. And yeah, it's funny. It's one of those movies that I swear I've seen a bunch of times in the 80s, but then every time I see it, I'm like, no, I really haven't seen this as many times as I thought I have. I just get it mixed up with Fright Night and Once Bitten and all the other kind of 80s comedy vampire movies. But yeah, check out my review of that. It was my wife hated it, so, or didn't hate it, but she didn't really appreciate it. So there's that review. And then I fired up Tucker and Dale versus Evil again. My wife hadn't had a chance to see it, and I think I watched that at my 2014 horror movie challenge, and I was telling her how much I enjoyed it. And if you're a fan of Cabin in the Woods and Evil Dead, etc., then you'll probably dig it. And it's really inventive, pretty much all the way through, and it's a simple one joke, like what if the hillbilly killers in the woods are actually just misunderstood and that they're on their vacation and the horrible decrepit cabin they're going to is their vacation home fixer-upper, and just everything they do is misread by these college kids as being malevolent when they're really just cuddly, fun-loving guys just out to have a good time. So it was interesting noticing that Brendan J. McLaren was one of the college kids, because when I saw it, I had no idea who he was. And then now watching Harper's Island again recently, and then watching Slasher not too long ago, I was like, oh, hey, I know that guy. But yeah, still fun after all this time. Then we fired up Tales from the Darkside, the movie, often like jokingly referenced as Creepshow 3, because it's a very similar anthology structure. 3 stories, one with Steve Buscemi and Christian Slater and Julianne Moore, based on the old Arthur Conan Doyle story about a mummy that can get weaponized, essentially, by the right people. And then Buster Poindexter in one tale about a killer cat and a hitman sent to kill the killer cat, which is pretty interesting stuff. And then the classic finale with James Remar and Ray Dong Chung in a love story also involving gargoyles, which yeah, the special effects may be a little rubbery than I had remembered them being, but a lot of style in that sucker. So yeah, and then there's the cool, Creepshow-esque surrounding tale of a young kid that's about to be cooked by Deborah Harry. So that was pretty cool. And actually, we didn't watch the DVD this time. I actually watched it in high def on Amazon, so which looked pretty good, actually. Then a flashback to 2006 with James Gunn's Slither. I hadn't seen this in a while. Man, really, really fun flick. It's got that James Gunn style to it. Small town taken over by an alien entity. A little bit of a Night of the Creeps throwback there. Michael Rooker and Elizabeth Banks are in here, and Nathan Fillion as the reluctant anti-hero, trying to make heads or tails of what's going on when all these people are being usurped into this gross kind of alien entity. And yeah, a lot of black humor, a lot of twisted humor, a lot of deaths played for comedy. So if that thing makes you squeamish, it's not as bad as Super, another James Gunn flick, which is really intense / bizarre / funny. But yeah, good fun. Love this flick. Then, just because I had to start watching Slither, of course, I saw it in the theater, and so now we kind of slipped with the whole modus operandi of trying to watch films I hadn't seen before. So yeah, this one again, a perennial classic. Jewel and the Grudge. I had the Korean DVD of this, which was the first time I saw it, but we actually fired up the Lionsgate American domestic issue, which actually has a pretty cool commentary track with Sam Raimi and Scott Spiegel on here. It's actually not bad. One of my favorite J-horror films. I love the kind of it's not really Tarantino, but it's got a very episodic structure to it, broken up by characters, and it jumps around in time at points, and yeah, the more I see it, the more I love it. And I also love it just how much the house is a character within the film. And unlike the remake, the house doesn't have to be completely dim and loaded with cobwebs and dilapidated, etc. It just looks like a Japanese house, and that's what's really cool. One of my favorite parts is bit with a girl that runs to her very, very like modern looking apartment and is terrified even with all the lights on and watching like this kind of uplifting TV programming. I love when it brings the horror to like mundane situations or situations where it just kind of feels safe, and then you realize you're not safe. So yeah, love Joe the Grudge. Seen this ass tons of times. Then fired up another one that I saw for the first time a couple of years ago, but Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat. It isn't as amazing as it thinks it is, and it's like, and Sam is a pretty cool character, the pumpkin-headed little trick-or-treater, but you can almost sense like a little bit of pretension in the character, like he was created to be a cinema icon of horror, like, oh, this is gonna be the next Michael Myers, this is gonna be the next Jason Voorhees, and it's like, it's almost too intense. But that said, it's a fun anthology, but it's even more fun because it's not played out like a traditional anthology. The different stories are happening concurrently, and they actually flash back to it. It jumps around in time again. Brian Cox has a pretty interesting segment that is largely told by itself, and that is saved until later, but it does tie in directly with bits that happen earlier on. Yeah, good cast. Anna Paquin, Dylan Baker in there is a pretty interesting role. And yeah, there's a cool story about a bunch of kids that are, killed in a bus accident, and some other kids that are going to appease their souls. That one was a really, really cool story. But yeah, I liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was good watching it the second time. Then we had to go for the cutting edge, 99 maybe? Yeah, it must have been 99. Jan de Bont's The Haunting. And yeah, it's so interesting that this happened. Like, I can understand that there would be a CGI horror movie version of Twister. Yeah. And this was around that time that horror movies were like in that post-Scream phase where there was a lot of stuff like House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts, and there was this throwback to 50s and 60s horror films, but in a really, really computer graphics, like over-the-top modern effects fashion, and it was like a really bad idea. And this is the most expensive of those really bad ideas, and it's yet another telling of The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson's novel. Around the same time, Stephen King did Rose Red, and yep, it's decent cast: Liam Neeson, Lily Taylor, Owen Wilson, Catherine Zeta-Jones. And it's about a fear experiment, though in this case it's a veiled experiment. It's supposed to be a sleep study, but it's really a fear experiment. And yeah, the CGI is really bad. I mean, there's some children's faces that are in sheets and curtains and stuff, and it just looks like goopy plastic. So bad. And it's just the concept that you take Robert Wise's The Haunting, which is one of the most like lauded horror films of all time, the pinnacle of what you don't see is scarier than what you do see, and then to be like, yes, let's turn that product into the horror Twister ghosty thrill ride movie was a bizarre concept, and certainly didn't pay off, but it was a trip watching this. This is the amazing DTS ES version. This thing was a hot commodity back in the day. Everybody wanted to have this because it's got crushing bass and just really, really intense surround sound, and this was just like, the home theater destroyer choice du jour back in the day. So this is actually more, beloved than the movie ever had a chance of being, just because of the DTS soundtrack. So I had to give that a shot, and I don't know, it's got some stuff going for it. It's got some fun moments, and the set design is interesting to say the least, but CGI just sucks. Then I had to fire up a Laserdisc that I got from my man Moikey not too long ago. Joe Dante's The Howling. I hadn't seen this since I was really young, and it was on cable, and I didn't quite understand what was going on. And yeah, it's a really interesting werewolf film, in particularly the first part, because it's got Dee Wallace as a news reporter, going undercover to kind of crack this case of this man who's been stalking her. And it doesn't tell you all that stuff right away, but it's got a real kind of weird, like, Network meets Looking for Mr. Goodbar vibe to the first part of it, which was not in the original novel it was based on. And then it turns into a tale of her kind of trying to escape her fears and her recurring nightmares after this incident by going to this idyllic retreat up in the woods. And obviously things get wolfier from there on. Really cool stuff. Dick Miller's in it, and fun cast, and Rick Baker and Rob Bottin did some crazy effects here. The only thing is that the effects take so long because it's real latex porn. Like there's some these unveiling scenes that were lauded right up there with American Werewolf in London. So yeah, it's amazing just how long the effects transitions take, and you have Dee Wallace like just stuck against a filing cabinet the whole time. Like, hold on, I'm just gonna sit here for about 12 minutes and turn into a werewolf, and then I'm gonna get you. But yeah, and some of the effects, like this was one of the first transformation scenes to have like air bladders underneath the latex to kind of give a interesting look to it, like real physical transformation. But then when you watch it now, it just looks like a bunch of fluttering goofiness. It doesn't really seem to have any rhyme or reason. It's just, let's put air bladders under there. But it's still pretty cutting edge. And there is one werewolf that is unforgivable because it looks like a goofy little Chewbacca Pomeranian. It really underserves the intensity that they're going for in that scene. But it's a fun flick, and there's a lot of really cool throwbacks to Roger Corman, Forrest J. Ackerman, etc. A lot of good in-jokes, etc. And very, kind of like almost a bit postmodern, and something you aren't used to seeing in an early 80s product, for sure. So yeah. Thanks, Moikey. Even though there's a defect on the end of side 2, there's some sort of pressing flaw, so like the last minute or so is just like laser lock city, unfortunately. But what are you gonna do? A lot of good extras on here as well too. Then we went back to the J-horror, and I wanted to check out one of the newer products from Takashi Shimizu, who had done The Grudge, and this one is called Tormented, also known as Rabbit Horror, and it's a sort of sequel to this was in 3D in Japan, and it's a spiritual sequel to his other film, Shock Labyrinth. It's a tale of a young girl and her younger brother, and they have a father who's does these, children's fantasy storybooks, and puts them together and makes them like pop-up books and very intricate, but he's detached and clearly mourning the loss of 2 wives. And there's also a lot of rabbit action going on in here. The characters actually go to see the film Shock Labyrinth within this movie in a scene that almost reminded me of something from Boot, where the characters go to a movie and they go see Spider-Man or whatever. But in this case, it's 3D, and this rabbit doll that kind of spins out of Shock Labyrinth actually comes out, and the kid in the audience grabs it, puts it in his backpack, takes it home, and then starts having all sorts of visitations from a large rabbit-like creature that varies from, big Easter Bunny rabbit to a realistic rabbit mixed with an Easter Bunny rabbit. Kind of off-putting. Not quite as crazy as Frank from Donnie Darko, but still some bizarre stuff. And later on, you learn that there's a lot more psychological trauma going on in this family than you had expected. And I've learned a lot of people say it doesn't make any sense, but I thought it made, actually quite a lot of sense, actually. And it had a very, almost like Guillermo del Toro wrap up, something a la, Pan's Labyrinth or something. Kind of tragic fantasy vibe to it towards the end. So it's not exactly terrifying, but it's got a lot of really good visuals, and it does have some spooky moments, etc. So I thought it was a lot more satisfying than I was anticipating. Then I delved back into the films from the 80s that I saw, but I was too young to understand, and then never really got a chance to go see again or pick up again. And dug into Tony Scott's The Hunger with Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon and David Bowie, and it's really a shock how little of the film David Bowie is in. But it's interesting because it's got Tony Scott. It's his first, feature film, and he is out Ridleying Ridley in this. And it's just interesting how he never really made another movie like this. This movie is definitely wearing a lot of Blade Runner influence on its sleeve, and just very art film, very melancholic, languid. Lot of intense intercutting, which doesn't always work, but there's some strong stuff going on there for sure. Bauhaus doing Bela Lugosi's Dead, and the intro is iconic stuff. And yeah, it's a little artier than it probably should be, but it's got some moments for sure, and it's worth checking out. This Blu-ray from the Warner Archive collection is gorgeous too. So yeah, it looked fantastic, looked brand new. Then I fired up another Laserdisc, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I still remember picking up the script for this sight unseen at this one place in Boston, and it just said untitled by Wes Craven. I didn't even know it was a Nightmare movie until like I was reading it, and I just remember getting blown away by the whole postmodernism of it. If you haven't seen it, it's the film that rejuvenated the Nightmare franchise by telling the tale of the actors from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So Heather Langenkamp, instead of playing Nancy, plays herself as an actress who's trying to kind of make ends meet while raising a family and dealing with a bunch of earthquakes going on. And she's got a son who's got some sleep issues, and Freddy is possibly trying to come back into the world, but not just, any world, but the actual real world, as opposed to the world of cinema fantasy. Yeah, some fun stuff. It kind of like gets a little less dark at the end. Like, it's got an okay ending, but it doesn't fulfill the promise, I think, that like Wes Craven and a bunch of other people kind of set up. But it's got a real good sense of dread, a lot like Lord of Illusions, where this stuff is going to happen, and it's more the dread of something happening that winds you up more than the actual events when they do happen. But yeah, it's got the score in particular is really crappy. I had totally forgotten about how TV movie of the week that was, so that was a bit of a letdown. But it was fun watching it, and side 2's got a little bit of rot, unfortunately, but yeah. And then I actually didn't watch this version, but this is my old HK DVD. I watched the Arrow version of Hideo Nakata's Dark Water. Check out my review if you want to see my thoughts on it, but really enjoyed this film. And another Koji Suzuki adaptation, the writer who brought us The Ring. And it's a good divorce psychological drama mixed with some supernatural elements, and really a satisfying horror flick, so I enjoyed it. And finalizing things, I have to do it every year, and despite the fact that I was trying to watch some new stuff, even though a lot of the stuff I had seen, had to dig into John Carpenter's Halloween, and this time did the 35th anniversary edition Blu-ray again with the controversial color timing. But yeah, there you go, you see the backside. It's amazing, it's classic. Can't touch it, so it's still awesome every year. And yeah, so that was it. I made it. 31 days, 31 horror films. So I finally redeemed myself for the poor performance of last year. So yeah, let me know what you guys watched. Tell me down below. We'll talk horror movies for a little bit, and hopefully you had fun with these kind of quick little mini capsule reviews. And hopefully, maybe you saw some of these flicks yourself and dug them, or thought they were a big pile of poop. But hopefully you guys are having a great Halloween. Talk to you soon. Cheers. Thanks for hanging out.